Good afternoon. I'm Father David. Thank you for joining me today for Disciple Time as we are looking at the memorial of Saint Anthony. And I really want to focus today on imitating and emulating the holy ones and the saints because that is going to bring transformation in our life that we would not get had we not engaged in those spiritual disciplines and habits. So, what do we know about St. Anthony? Well, we know he was born in Egypt in a little village called Cumans, which is on the left bank of the Nile. He was born approximately 251 AD. And we know a lot about St. Anthony's life because his disciple, St. Athanasius, wrote a biography on him that's pretty detailed. And one of the fascinating things that we learn about St. Anthony is he lived a very ascetic life. He was a desert hermit, or what we would call a desert father. In fact, he goes by several different names in the church. That's St. Anthony the Abbot, St. Anthony the Great, St. Anthony of Egypt, St. Anthony of Fire, St. Anthony of the Desert, and St. Anthony the Anchorite. In fact, he is the patron saint of fire and the patron saint of farm animals. So he was out in the desert for 3 decades before he emerged to share his spiritual insights, and he eventually became an abbot to a group of fellow monks. He was a counselor to many pilgrims that came out, and there's many stories of people receiving miraculous healing at his hands. So one of the things we learn in his biography is that his asceticism, his service, and teaching were all grounded in a very unique practice, and that is a practice of conversation with Christ through a very deep contemplative prayer life. And on one account, there's a story about two Greek philosophers that actually came to visit St. Anthony. They had heard stories of Anthony and how his disciples came from all over to learn from him, how his intercession had brought about miraculous healings. They had heard about his divine insights, his comforting of the suffering. And so the philosophers came to Anthony and they were assuring him that they had come to him because they knew he was a wise man. But Anthony kind of knew the story on the Greek philosophers in his day. They loved words, they loved arguments, they liked hearing other people's insights and kind of picking them apart. This was kind of one of the things that was going on in that day. And so he kind of figured they wanted to hear what St. Anthony was going to say about Christianity, about particularly the value of asceticism and the contemplative life, because they kind of wanted to debate that lifestyle with him. But I love what he says. He says, "If you think me wise, become what I am, for we ought to imitate the good. Had I gone to you, I should have imitated you. But since you came to me, become what I am, for I am a Christian." And I think this gets to the nuts and bolts of what we can learn, or one of the things we can learn from St. Anthony, and that is one tangible way to perceive what the deep mystic perceives, one practical way to hear Christ more clearly in our day to day life is to stop talking and debating and just enter into the practices of the holy people and their holy rule of life. And specifically, if we're going to follow St. Anthony's ways, into this deep contemplative prayer life. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? And we can see this in our day-to-day life because Bishop Jim, for about a year now, has been fasting from certain foods, from certain drinks. He's been abstaining from certain activities, all part of his Lenten devotion. Now, no one's going to know what Bishop Jim has truly gained, what insights, what illumination has truly gained through that Lenten devotion, unless they actually do it. And that's the point we're getting at. And I think that's the point that we're seeing in our reading for the day from the book of Hebrews, chapter 6, is verse 10 through 12. It says this: "For God is not unjust, so as to overlook your work and the love you have demonstrated for his name, by having served and continuing to serve the holy ones. We earnestly desire each of you to demonstrate the same eagerness for the fulfillment of hope until the end, so that you may not become sluggish, but imitators of those who, through faith and patience, are inheriting the promises." And I love that because it draws our focus back to our need to imitate and emulate the holy ones and the saints so that we can gain the benefit of their spiritual practices and their spiritual habits. Now, one of the ways we afford this opportunity here at Holy Communion Church is through centering prayer. Centering prayer leads into contemplative prayer. And the truth is, you can't understand the benefits of centering prayer if you've never engaged in it, right? Entering into conversation with Christ through contemplative prayer requires contemplative practice. Now, there's other ways to hear Christ in prayer. There's other methods of prayer that will get you there. There's a great book on that we just read in our diaconal formation class. So I'm not saying centering prayer and contemplative prayer is the only way, but I'm saying this is one of the ways that we offer this at Holy Communion Church. So there's several ways you can participate in this. And one of those is on Thursday afternoon after Mass between 12:40 and 1 p.m. For 20 minutes, we do centering prayer. Come on out if you want to see what that's all about. Another way that you could involve yourself in centering prayer is through the Contemplative Outreach mobile app, and they have that on iPhone or Android. You can click on that app, and they have some guided prayers there that you can do. We also have a Contemplative Outreach organization here in Bend. There's additional sites where people gather for centering prayer. That's another method. And another opportunity we actually have here at Holy Communion Church for those interested is the Religious Order of St. Luke. This is coming very soon. It's not actually here yet, but it's in the process of coming. And being in the Order of St. Luke, we really learned the benefits of the Lucan rule of spirituality. And this is different than the Benedictine rule of spirituality. So at like Mount St. Angel, the Benedictine monks, they gather and they cloister in a monastery and they pray the daily office. Well, the Order of St. Luke's very incarnational out in the community. So instead of gathering in a monastery, you stay in the vocation you're called in. And this is like an additional vocational call to a monastic lifestyle that's lived out in the community. So you will pray the daily office in the morning and the evening and stuff like that as well. But you're trying to live a sacramental life of service in a very Lucan way out in the community. And so we're going to bring that here to Holy Communion Church. And we think this might be a good thing if you're interested in learning more about a monastic way of life that will fit into your life, your busy life. And this is open to men, to women, to clergy, to lay, to married, to single, to celibate. It does not matter. It's open. It's all inclusive to everyone. And so it's a very good order to get involved in to find out more about those spiritual disciplines and habits. So what is the application for the journey today? It's this: adopting the spiritual disciplines and habits of the saints and other holy people can lead to breakthroughs in our own life. So don't be afraid to engage in new habits and new spiritual disciplines. Lent is coming up very soon. That might be a good time to start. And if you're looking for a place to do centering prayer or learn more about contemplative prayer, then why don't you come out and join us on Thursday this week? Well, I hope to see you there. Thank you for joining me today for the Memorial of St. Anthony. Christ in every